Australian writing. It's pretty cool what you do. So thank you. And thank you all. I'm seeing all these amazing faces. So Kate, can you see everyone here? Can you see all these boxes like I can? Are you?
Yeah, I had a little look at them all, but they're distracting me because they're all so delightful.
Okay, well, yeah, I sort of like to keep the boxes up because I know a lot of these people, including my beautiful mum, who's up in the like. She's actually right near you in my box.
Yay! Hello, Trent's mum.
My mum turned up for Kate's book, but I just want you to know, Kate, all of these people are just big Brisbane book loving fans and fans of yours, and they've turned out. And I just want to thank you all for turning up to support another Australian book. You know, you could be watching The Block, and you chose to watch
Yes.
to watch, talk about Kate's beautiful book, The Mother Fault. It's a real honour for me to do this and to be with you tonight, Kate, talking about
Thank you,
this
Trent.
extraordinary and this unique thing that I just told Kate I've never read anything like it, and I can't wait. If you guys haven't read it, I can't wait for you to experience it because it's an Australian book and an Australian story I didn't think kind of possible even, and there's a world where once upon a time these type of books didn't get written here in this beautiful country of ours. So I'm really proud of you, Kate, that you did. But can we just kick off? And guys, we're going to have a whole big bunch of questions at the end. So if you got a question for Kate, please just store it away and we'll get to it. We've got a big sort of 15-minute chunk at the end, which always goes fast, but we'll try and get there. But Kate, I'm going to go deep, right? There's no reason not to just start deep. I'm just
Okay,
go
go.
real. You put a picture of your young self that I saw on Instagram, and I thought it was one of the most beautiful things. It was this young girl, this young Kate, who kind of, I think you'd won a story writing prize.
Yeah,
or
only shortlisted, Trent. Only shortlisted.
Okay, that is the sweetest picture I've ever seen, right? And it got me quite emotional because I know the world you're in right now. I know how you feel right now. And I see Ben Hobson's here. Man, I bet you Ben felt it. I bet you we've all felt it. Chrissy's felt it. When you look back at that girl in that pic, man, could you possibly have believed you'd be second book, so warmly received already? Take me back to that girl and every thought that she had running in her head and whether she ever thought you'd be here in 2020.
Trent, that's such a delightful intro. Thank you so much. And to everyone who's here. And to go straight back there, no, because that 13-year-old, 14-year-old thought that normal people didn't publish books. And I know you've spoken about this so much before, Trent, as well, but it was, I mean, I had so many books in my house and my parents were teachers and we loved books, but I still thought that a book that was sitting up there on the shelf was not something that I was ever going to be able to do. And I scribbled poetry and wrote all the time and wrote down that I wanted to be a writer. But the day that I got this, I still remember it. I got the letter to say that I'd been shortlisted, and it was from John Marsden. So this was Tomorrow When the War Began. For everyone else who's my age exactly, we went hard for that book. I was in year 7 and I'd written this thing and I opened the envelope and it was that first, we get very good at reading the first line of the letter, which says, thanks so much for submitting, unfortunately, and you just throw the letter away. But this time it was one of those congratulations, and I froze on the spot, and I couldn't believe. I remember, you saw the picture, this book, it's somewhere up here at the moment, but it's just worn with age and because it's such a precious thing. And it was it was what I needed. I actually met John Marsden again at my very first Writers' Festival at Byron for Skylarking, and I was freaking out. I was next to Kerry O'Brien in the green room, and my book was, and it was 3 days out. I had no idea what I was doing. I was really freaking out. And John Marsden, of course, was in the bloody tent next to me, and he had so many people out the line. I think someone asked me if I would sign their book, and it wasn't even my book. It was that kind of a festival. But and he said, "Yeah, I remember you. I remember you. I remember that you were going to be a writer." And it was just.
Is that for real? Do you think he did? He remembered?
I don't know if he did. I don't know if he just knows how to make. He's a teacher. He knows how to make kids feel like it is possible. It's
Brilliant,
possible to do that thing.
And that's right. It doesn't matter whether he did or not. He made your day, and he made you.
Totally did.
Well, congratulations. I just think congratulations to that girl and congratulations to this woman. Tell us about this book. The hardest question I'll give you tonight.
Yeah.
What's The Mother Fault about?
Okay, The Mother Fault is about Mim. The Mother Fault is about this woman who is tired and she's over it. She's over having been the primary carer of her kids for the last 11 years. She's over having given up her career. She's over the fact that her husband is a fly-in, fly-out worker. He's in Indonesia. They were both in the same industry, their geology backgrounds, but he's been flying out to work on a gold mine in Indonesia. And when the novel opens, her husband's missing. Ben is missing. And, to put it frankly, right at the start, she's just really shitty about it. She's like, I need you to be home. What's happened? And it's a very near future Australia, Trent. It feels nearer this week and this year than it ever did when I was writing it. But it's Australia as we know it, but there's been a change of government. The Department of Everything is in charge. There's widespread surveillance. Everyone is chipped. And when Mim tries to work out where Ben's gone, the department basically threatened her that she needs to just stay where she is, not ask too many questions. And if she does, they'll take her children away, which is, of course, the greatest threat that any of us ever have, that governments use all the time in many countries in the world and still in this one as well.
Well, that moment is, for me, one of the great inciting incidents I've read in recent times. Don't F with a mum and her children, It's just like, and from that point on, when she gets that kind of creepy phone call from that government representative who says essentially, you don't want to lose your kids, and it's like such a terrifying moment, and then justifies anything that Mim does afterwards, because man, this woman is one of the great mums in Australian literature. So before I get onto those sort of moments, those narrative moments, tell me about some of those lightning bolts, Kate, in terms of when the book came to you. Do you remember the first kernel of a thought that became The Mother Fault?
Oh, I do. I had it. I wrote down in this Word document that I wasn't to open until Skylarking was properly finished. And I wrote down, Mum has to leave Australia on a boat with her kids. And cool. That's what I wanted to do. And to try and work out that, was I writing a dystopia? What was I doing? Like, how big did the threat need to be for her to be pushed into this situation? That's what's taken me a hell of a long time to work out. But I was really stressed at the time. It was the height of, and I know we haven't really changed our policies at all, but the height of Australian government locking people up who were seeking asylum in this country. And, at the start I had those kind of high hopes and ambitious hopes about saying something hugely political. And then, of course, as you would well know, Trent, that the story and the characters kind of take over, and they take over the story. And the story ended up being something very different from that. But that was the key thing. I needed to make this woman run with her kids out of Australia. And bloody hell, it's hard to write kids on every page of a book like that. That was one of...
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah.
Yeah, that was... And I think that it did come as well. I was writing this with 2 young kids at home and with all of my friends. And I know that some of them are here tonight who have young children as well. And we have talked about this glorious thing that we're in with these children who we adore, would do anything for, would... run across a whole country, get on a sailing ship, kill for. And yet some days we want to chuck them in the rubbish bin. Like it's like that. Like some days when they're both yelling at you, or they're all yelling at you, mum, mum, mum. And you just think, what has happened to my life? Like, what has happened to my life? What's become of me? So that's what I wanted to do with Mim.
What I love about Mim's whole journey is that it feels like a day of school lockdown schooling, except you put her in the most dramatic circumstance. So it's like, take all of that arguing and all of that pleading to, like, please don't break down, please don't cry, please help me out, and then put Mim in the most dramatic and terrifying circumstances. It's really...
And what the thing is, Trent, and let me say right now, I have not been in kind of life and death situations with my kids, but But I know, and I know that parents talk about all this all the time. The response that happens in our body when, our kids are doing that to us, or we think that our kids are in danger, whether that be just like on the swing or in the middle of the open ocean, the response in our body is the same. So it was kind of easy. And I remember talking to my friend saying like, well, what would you do if you had to run in the middle of the night? And people just bursting into tears, even thinking about it. And so I knew that there was a lot of heat there. There was a lot of energy for me, both to explore for myself, but also for readers.
Yeah, brilliant. There was something you mentioned when you had a Word document when you were writing Skylarking. Tell me about what that feels like to kind of get jazzed about an idea, but still have to go, oh man, I've got to finish Skylarking first. Like, was that part, like, is that hard sometimes when you just go, you get onto that new thing, because editing and the whole process of that first book,
it's so long. And I suspect that you're in exactly the same position right now, Trent, where you also then do all this part, which is so amazing when you got to talk to people about it. And we were just saying before we let everyone in, the way that people articulate back to you what your book is about is incredible. Like it's such a gift that people give you that as well. But most writers are already like ferreting away on their new book and excited about it. And I know from the podcast, we've interviewed people where I've been like, back down, like stop talking about the new project. You've got to sell this one first to all the readers. But it's hard, it's hard because you're excited about the new thing. But I think, I think with this one, I wanted to really, I needed to build a head of steam for the Mother Fault, and it took me a really long time to work out how to do it. And I've talked about this a little bit before, certainly on the podcast, but I couldn't work out what the book was. I didn't know how to write spec fic, and I didn't know how to write dystopia, and I'd come from historical fiction. And I was at the incredible Bundanon on a residency there, and I decided, I'd been listening to Charlotte Wood talk about the natural way of things and how she didn't know how to address the material that she had. She didn't know what shape it was going to take. And so I emailed her and said, can you be my mentor? And she said yes. And so a lot of what I was working through with her was my own confidence as a writer and how to just kind of own this thing that I was doing. But it was also about the kind of strange ways that we can approach a story. And even when it's and when it's terrifying and really seems very big and ambitious, that's the bit you kind of have to go for, even though you think maybe you can't do it.
How do you even pen an email like that to Charlotte Wood? Like, let's say it's Trent Dalton and he's writing to like Cormac McCarthy and he's like, dear Mr. McCarthy, like, where do I go from there? Like,
oh my gosh,
out there like that to get
and do you know what had happened to me? Bundanon, have you been there? Bundanon's extraordinary. So it's in Shoalhaven, Arthur Boyd's property that they gifted as an artist residency. So it's incredible, very isolated. And I'd been walking and I nearly stepped on this enormous snake, and I thought like, I didn't have my phone with me. I thought, that would have been it. This would have been the moment where, like, she's on a stupid residence. I hadn't yet got on the sailing, on the yacht.
Like, where's that manuscript?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I was just like, stuff it. You know what? Like, stuff being kind of small and scared about these things. Like, what's the worst that can happen? She'll say no. Totally. And she didn't. She said yes. So that's how I did it.
That's extraordinary to have her kind of just to lean on. I'd imagine you're not emailing her every day, but just in a broad sense. Like, is she unpacking story beats with you, or is she sort of that deep, or is it just
much broader? The most extraordinary thing is that she did it without, she read, a little bit of the manuscript that I had, but I was in very early stages and she didn't actually read it until much later when I asked her to assess it kind of formally. It was very much about problems I was coming up against, holding my nerve, finding the confidence to write this story. So there would be a lot of recommending books for me to read and talking through problems. She was on board when I got on the yacht and went sailing as part of the research. And the thing that was extraordinary, I've looked back at them, the notes she gave me after that. She asked me like maybe, like 150 questions. She had like, what did the corner of things feel like? What was the taste in the back of your throat? What, like, questions after the experience, to really just make sure and she prepped me for it beforehand as well, but to make sure that I was really paying attention to the sensory experience that I'd had on the boat so that I could, feed it back into the book.
Oh, that's brilliant. Like, that's such a gift that she's done for you. I mean, at the time, just going to remember
Yeah.
this, like, yeah, like better than a diary. Um, okay, tell me about your day. Tell me about you're a mum. I just find the writer life is, I know from, I'm a dad and it's sort of hard to squeeze those hours in. And what was your days? Take us through a day writing the Mother Fault, a random
This
day.
one, yeah, so this one's been funny because it's happened over such a period of time where, like, my youngest started school, so I suddenly had both kids in school, and it was the year that I'd said, okay, this is the year I go for it, right? This is the year I'm either going to become a writer or I have to go back to being a teacher or do the, like, double, triple side hustle of trying to make cash. Like, I'm either going to do it or I'm not. So
Yeah,
I'd
right.
given myself a bit of time to do that. So I was still kind of working and writing in little bits of time, but I'm a binge writer, like massive binge writer. So I
Okay.
have to go away. So I had residencies at Varuna and Bundanon, which were both extraordinary. But I also go with my writers group. We go away twice a year to a house. We have Varuna rules between 9 and 5, and then we're allowed to drink and debrief. But that's how I got most of it written. I really got most of it written like that. And then, in the middle of all of this, and it's all history now, but I lost a publisher. I didn't have anywhere to put the book. I had to find an agent. I had to find a publisher. So, it was kind of it is the exact journey. I hate using the word journey, but it is the exact journey that this book needed to go on. I'm sure of that now, but it did not feel like that in the middle of it. It felt like a disaster.
Well, I find it extraordinary because I imagine all, like how things, dare I say, are meant to be, but it's like, this book has suddenly become so prescient, and it's quite bizarre reading this book,
It is
given the
bizarre.
summer we had in Australia and
Yeah.
given the year we're having in Australia, given the things we're seeing in the headlines every day about things like surveillance and a million and one things inside this book. But can you tell me, I was really taken by your experiences over summer in particular, and it's all through this book. Like, I was just reading some of the bits as they're driving up to I want to try not to give away any spoilers, but
Yeah.
an amazing quest, a great journey, dare I say journey again, but it's a real journey. It's a great journey that Nim and the kids make, and Nick. But it's going across the Australian landscape. You paint
Yeah.
vividly. And I wonder how much of summer 2019, 2020 figured in that writing, Kate.
It's a really good question, Trent. And I had already written a lot of it. We spent 3 months last year, me and my partner and the kids traveling around Australia in WA. So there was parts that I kind of rewrote in as I was going. Like I just have to put in this particular landscape or some description. But in terms of the summer that we had here, we were evacuated from where we camp on the East Gippsland coast, and we actually lost all that. We had 15 minutes to get out. We lost all our camping gear. We were safe, and it's of course nothing like, I know that the incredible story that you wrote for the Australian, which I've read a number of times, about those people down there, down that part of the coast who lost their homes and more. What I had to do, we were already in editing at that stage, and I had to ring Fiona and say, I've got to change this. I hadn't, even though I had kind of pushed into the future, this near future of what fire would have done and what the climate crisis would look like in Australia, I hadn't actually pushed far enough. And so I had to kind of rewrite some of those descriptions. And they're not very much. It's like, in the end, it's 2 sentences, but it means the world, because suddenly I had written about these unprecedented fires, and we just lived through them. So we had to push it out. And of course, the same with the surveillance thing. Like, I cannot tell you, Trent, how many, the workshopping that I did in my own brain to try and work out what the Australian community would need, what kind of pressure they would need on them, terrorism, the rest of it, to all take on board this surveillance. And then I could have just used a bloody pandemic. That would have been much simpler.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah, life will always just give you the story. Wow,
Yeah.
if you went that road. That's extraordinary. I find it extraordinary, the journey of these things, but also that you kind of held true to the initial concept. I think that, which is why I sort of said in the intro that it's felt like something I didn't think possible. I know that's a bit dorky, but it's like, I love that you went there in that way of that sort of never let me go way, and that kind of, it reminds me of that great film Children of Men, where do you know that movie? I don't know. I just love that movie, and it's like, but it's that dystopia, like dystopia. So they need to come up with a different word than dystopia, because the minute you say dystopia, everyone thinks Blade Runner, but it's like this book's so subtly dystopic, you know, and it's kind of in a wonderful way. I just love the subtleties of the terrible world in the terrible near future, you know, and the subtle ways you drop it into the narrative. And ultimately at heart, I felt like it's just this beautiful family story. And
it is, you know, the other thing, Trent, was, and like I get very bound up in rules. Like I'm a rule follower and I like to know how to do things, and I want to read the canon. If I'm going to write dystopia, I want to read the canon and make sure I get it all right. But I was like, it's not quite any of those things. It's something a little bit different, but I didn't really have the confidence until that mentorship with Charlotte, just to name it and say, well, I don't know what it is. This is what it is. This is its thing. And I really have, like, you know, I read a lot. I laugh at Children of Men because I don't know if there's any of my old high school friends here, but we've had ongoing arguments about Children of Men, which is why it's so funny. Right. But also that I also really like an end of the world movie. I like a bit of Armageddon. I like a bit, you know, a tsunami coming through. Right. I'm a sucker for romances that happen in those big explosive kind of ways. But I couldn't work out, how do I write my literary book, like that's what I want to write with an Armageddon ending. I couldn't like marry those things together. And you know, I'm so glad like to have Fiona Henderson at Simon & Schuster on board in the end to say, and she's so, you know, amazing and wonderful, and she just said, well, of course you can. That's just what you do. Like that's just what the book is. And to be able to own that was incredible.
Because that's so great. That's such good editing, you know, because you're just so nervous about your own thoughts. You know, you're just like, you don't trust a thing. And it just is so important to have those people who go, no, man, you can do that. And I'm so glad you did. There's so many cool writers. You know, there's some really cool writers in part of this, Kate. I don't know if you can see, like Tony Jordan's here and Melanie.
Oh my gosh, Tony Jordan. So I have to tell her quick because Tony Jordan, Tony. Tony's an incredible teacher, and I'd worked with her before, but I was like, Tony, I need to do your novel course. Like I'm going to do your novel course in a year. And I was way too early. Tony will tell anyone this to be ready to do that course. But she sat me down at one stage, and there were two really important things that Tony said. Tony said at the end, if she's so unhappy, Kate, if Mim's so unhappy, why hasn't she left before the first page? And it was this incredibly useful, so useful thing to set me off. And she also asked me who I was going to kill. And I think at that point, like in quiet literary novels, we don't normally kill people. Having said that, I killed someone in my first book too, but so maybe I am that writer. But it was really liberating to go, okay, I'm going to kill someone. Like Ace, this is the kind of book. And it took me a long, long time to get to that point, like the iterations in between when Tony was working on it with me and to the end. But I got there. So Tony Jordan, just a million kisses. And also Brisbane. I've said this before. Brisbane literary world is obviously, Melbourne literary world is amazing, but if I could be in both at the same time, I would, because Brisbane, you're cool. So cool.
It's a thing. It
really is a thing.
Really a thing, and it has been for quite some time. That's great advice, Tony, because you do read the whole way, and you do sense like, oh man, someone's gonna die, and but
something's gonna happen.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say that about why didn't Mim leave? And the thing I really love when you're writing about marriage, you write about marriage beautifully, and you write about the phases of marriage really well, and you know, we've all been there in a marriage where, you know the phases and you clearly know the phases, and it's sort of that, and Mim's going through all those things, but her deep love of Ben is there, just constant. But can you tell me about that, like pulling in? I mean, I can't help but imagine that you're drawing on your own knowledge of the concept, well, of not necessarily marriage, but just intimacy. I think what was really important to me, Trent, was to get this sense that I
think that there's an element that we experience as new parents, certainly, which is a total loss of self. Like, where have I gone? And it's incredible and it's overwhelming and it's all those things, but there's a real sense, and I experienced it, and I know so many women experience it, of just thinking, like, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm like milk attached to a child is what I am. Right. And, you know, if that's happening for me, that's what I am. And I think what was really important to me, also there's this, in that loss of self, I think there's a bit of a loss of autonomy. And I remember feeling this, like when my partner went back to work and I was like, well, I don't know what to do. Don't leave me here with a child. Like, what am I supposed to do with this kid? Like, you know, feeling like I really wasn't on top of that. And I think that what I wanted Mim to experience and her to show is that all those different selves that we carry around with us, our young selves who are caught up in the potential of what our life is going to be. And that's why I had to have the character of Nick, you know, this old flame, because I think, you know, he serves to remind her of what she was as well, and what she still is. And I think that what we tend to do is go, okay, that's that self gone. You know, there's my 20s, bang, done. There's my 30s, done. Or there's my work self, and now here's my parent self. And we often try and compartmentalize them or even let them go entirely. And that's why I played with the geology stuff, because I wanted this idea of it being strata, that actually you recognize, you know, the whole of yourself. And in that marriage that, you know, it's shit sometimes, as it is for all of us, and it's also everything. And of course you would drive across, you know, an entire country and get on a yacht and all of those things. And but I think that question that I was asking too is what is it that you're prepared to do? And Ben's prepared to do something for the cause, and Mim is prepared to do something else, I suppose, in the end.
Essie, tell me about this girl who just became one of my favorite characters in the book by far. Did she just evolve like that for you? Did she just get stronger and stronger?
Yeah, she did. I think, actually, as you say that, and I remember us talking about your Molly hook, and I think they should totally hang out, Essie and Molly. But, you know, she did become stronger. And again, a wonderful writer, Penny Russin, did a beta read for me and told me really early on. She said, Kate, you do realize this is a love story between Mim and Essie, don't you? And I suppose I did realize that. But it took someone else to tell me it. And so she did become stronger. And also, Trent, as my own eldest daughter got older and sassier and cleverer and like in your face, mum, you know, back off, eye rolling. She's only 9. But, you know, it's a difficult thing. It's an amazing thing to watch. But as your kids kind of grow apart from you and you're still like, let me protect you, get away from me, I'm respecting you, all of those crazy emotions. And I knew that Essie had a lot to teach Mim, and that there was also an element of Mim kind of putting her arms around her child self as well for herself, you know, in Essie. But I loved writing her, and I miss her, and she surprised me. Essie surprised me, and I think, you know, I had to kind of tell the kids. They came to the Melbourne launch the other night, and my eldest daughter was a bit cross about the whole thing, because I swore during the launch, which she was not at all happy with. But, you know, I had to kind of frame it for them as well, because obviously I don't want them to read this book yet, but I said, you know, it's a book about what we learn from our kids, and also about what we are prepared to do to keep you safe, because we love you so much, you know, to try and frame it like that. But the kids are just clever. They're so clever. They've got it.
Yeah. Well, it's that beautiful thing. I love that thing where a kid in trauma just, you know, reminds us all as adult humans about how to behave, and it's a beautiful thing. Don't go there if you don't want to, but I wanted to ask you about your own dad. I saw this beautiful picture. I think it was your dad. It was like you on Instagram. Is that for Father's Day? Was that your dad?
Yeah. Big
like
beard.
Beautiful man, just with his kids out in the bush somewhere. I just thought that photo looked amazing. And tell me about your relationship with your dad, because the dad in this book is kind of, he's a presence who's not there, but it's kind of, he's a presence who's everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, he is. That's interesting you say that. It's funny because I had to try and I was trying to look for another photo of Dad to show that he still looks exactly the same nearly, but the beard is silver now. The beard is very silver.
Beautiful. Great.
You know, I wanted to write a dad. Mim's dad has passed away before the book opened, and you know, I think some of it, my dear father-in-law Graham passed away during the writing of this book too. So there was some of that was about writing grief as well, and how that all works out. But I think also that push and pull that Mim feels away from her family, and then back to them again. You know, family that's what I wanted to explore. Is place home, or is family home, or what is it that makes what is it that makes home? And I think that for her, she doesn't want to be like her big brother, who's an ass. You know, she's got a lot of grief around her family. She wants to look after her mum. It was an interesting. I think families are always incredibly interesting to write, and they come out of nowhere. Do you find this too? Like, they just, you know, brothers and sisters come in and they walk onto the stage and they start doing their own thing, and you kind of think, where did they come from?
Well, I think I'll be just writing about the people who lived outside the rest of my life. Sorry, up there in the top corner, but they're inspiring to me, and you can't, you know. But I felt that particularly when you were writing those, when Mim goes back to the kind of rural kind of family home, and just even bloody opening the gate, you know, you describe that so clearly, and just that feeling we all get when you go back to those mythical they've become myth, because
they do become myth.
Wrapped so much around those homes, and I really felt for Mim when she's just walking through every facet of that, to the photos on the bloody Duchess or whatever she sees, you know. Tell me about, can I go into this first time podcast you're doing, which is just a kind of wonderful thing for a lot of Australian writers to tune into. How much did talking to a gazillion authors help in the writing process, about their first book, help in the writing process of your second book?
Trent, it is such a dream. You know, with Catherine Collette, who's my co-host, we didn't know. We were begging people. Tony Jordan was actually one of our very first guests, and we were like, Tony, will you know, you're RMIT alumni, will you do this for us? And we didn't know what we were going to do, but I'm so obsessed with hearing writers talk and talking to them. Like, it's such a gift to be able to do this gig and talk to writers about their process. And I think one of the things that gave me enormous confidence during the writing of this book was that when I did come up, you know, skylarking was an utter gift of an experience. Like, it came, I didn't know I was writing it. I didn't know how to write a novel, and then it got published, and it went well. And it was just, I thought maybe that's what would happen every time, right? Like, it's this easy. and of course, when the inevitable kind of failings started happening, both in the manuscript and in the kind of the bookish world, it was those stories that I'd heard from all of those writers that helped me to go, okay, there's a million ways to get our story out into the world, and there's a million different ways that it happens, and people have so many rejections, and people swap publishers, and people do all this stuff, and so that gave me, it kind of lit it up, like that behind the scenes aspect of it, where we walk around thinking that all authors have like got it made and they're sorted and they just pump out the books and then they deal with all the emotions that happen, like it's just so easy, and that is just so far from the truth. And honestly, Trent, the kinds of conversations we have when the microphone is turned off have been as useful to me as the ones that when the mic is on too.
I hate myself, like, around book publishing time. Like, just I hate the human I become, and like just even lately, like I got this thing coming out a couple of weeks, and I've just been you know, I can't imagine. My wife is a saint just for sticking up with the douchebag she has to live with, just overthinking. And what's been your journey? Sorry to say that word again. How have you been emotionally in the past, like, 3 weeks?
Well, on Wednesday, which was launch day, like I'm like cool. I don't get stressed about talking in front of people. That stuff I've got down fine. But at lunchtime on Wednesday, and I suddenly had this vision that I'd done exactly the same thing on the launch day of Skylarking and on my wedding day, was that I called my best friend, who is currently in Broome, so she's very useless to me, and said, "Get me the hell out of here! Like, I'm done. I cannot deal with the hoopla. I can't deal with people." That earlier that week, I had also, Adam had come home from his work to find me sobbing, and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "People should stop being so bloody nice. Like, it's too much.
Yeah, right,
The
right.
niceness is too much." And I think that is actually something. It's really hard for us to write in this part here. It's hard to write, when you stupidly open up the browser and look at Goodreads and read a shitty review, and it's just as hard as when someone says, your book changed me, or all those things. Like, both of those positions, Liz
Yeah.
Gilbert's talked about this so much, are impossible to write in. Like, we need to be kind of that center part, grounded part to do the writing. So I think,
Completely.
I've learned a lot certainly from the podcast, from people saying, take this time off, or this is how you've got to do your Instagram, or do this thing. And I've learned to say yes. And I have an incredible team at Simon & Schuster, have just been amazing. Plus, Trent, the writing community, and there's a bazillion of them here, and the writing community is extraordinary and has your back. And like, people talk about not liking being on Twitter and the rest of it, but I can go on Twitter and go, "I'm freaking out. I don't know how to deal with this," and someone will have my back immediately. Like, I love that. I think it's the warmest, most joyous community to be part of, and I'm going to tear up. I love it. I love it.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Well, that's all coming back at you, though. That's all because you've given so much to it. That I would imagine.
Thank you, Trent.
You bloody get what you give. Absolutely, especially in writing, I'd imagine. What about writing in lockdown? Where are you at with, like, maybe say, I'm sorry to even bring it, it's ridiculous, but like, next book, are you even thinking about that in lockdown? Or do you just go, look, I'm just getting my kids through schooling, I'm just focusing, and is there time to create a Word document and do the little thing like you did with this one? And
There is, and I went hard at it for a weekend writing retreat with the incredible writer Sarah Santilli's, US writer, and wrote 10,000 words in 4 days, and I've got something. I've got 30,000 words now of this new thing. I did it in mornings. So I got up at 5:30 before, and did it at morning. And I now have this amazing little studio here that my darling husband built for me just before first lockdown. So it's just been such a gift, because I was kind of in a corner of the lounge room. That was my workspace. But what it's got, Trent, is got pinboard all over it, like recycled pinboard. So I've also been able to stick up a whole lot of pictures and timelines and my research. So even though I'm like loving talking about the mother fault all the time at the moment and being in it, I've also got this really centering space which has got all the pictures of my new work up, and it's got my research, and it's got a space for my books, and I can kind of just walk in here, and we call it the space that we go to, our writing retreat at Musk, we call it like a shortcut, because as soon as when you walk into that space, okay, I'm here to work, it smells the same, it's got this incredible energy in it, and we just know that we're there to work. And so that's what I've been able to have here, which is amazing.
that's so important. Yeah, that's where Twitter is, and that's where all that stuff, that's your space. All right, I'm going to swing it over to the wonderful Chrissy, because we're almost at that time for questions, guys. So if anyone's got any questions for this amazing author, we'd love to hear them. Chrissy, did we get any? Because I can continue asking someone. Yeah, okay, cool.
We've got plenty of questions. So Cass, the wonderful Cass Moriarty, who is another one of those incredible Brisbane writers who just gives so much. Has
so much, Cass.
So much. Oh my goodness, I would be lost without her. Now she's asked she said that you weave your sailing research so seamlessly into the story that it doesn't feel like you're showing off your knowledge, but more like the reader is discovering alongside Min what the experience of sailing is like. And so what things did you have to keep remembering to make that work so well? How did you make that balance?
Thank you, Cass. That's such a beautiful question. And I did take a lot of it out because I was a bit like a big sailing nerd when I came back, and I wanted to include everything. What I was really aware of is, and I really did write Mim's experience much like mine was, in terms of the fact that I didn't know. Everyone else on the boat knew exactly that you called the ropes a sheet and the rules of being on a boat, because they were all experienced crew members, and they'd taken me on because I was enthusiastic and I was writing a book. Like, I really didn't know anything. So they explained everything to me. So I could get that part in quite well, that feeling of being completely lost and not knowing where she was. I didn't get to do what Mim gets to do on the boat. Because I wasn't allowed out of the little bit in the middle, which I still can't remember the name of. But I did, like what I said about Charlotte before, like I took so many photographs. I kept a journal the whole time I was writing this book. It sits at about 150,000 words at the moment, but it still gets more because I'm writing about some of this kind of process as well. And so I took that with me. And so when I was off shift, I had the midnight shift, and then the afternoon shift. And so when I would get off shift, I'd go down and I'd write. And I went back to those pieces of writing because there's things like, shit, I actually think I'm going to die. This was a terrible thing. Why have I done this? I did not know what I was doing. That kind of stuff, as well as just this stream of consciousness. This is the most astonishing thing. There's flying fish. Like, you should have seen the moon last night. Like, just very present. So I used that. I used that as much as I could in the writing of that section. And then I had some sailing people read it to check that I got it right.
Great. There's another question here from an upcoming emerging writer in Brisbane, Bianca Milroy, who was just recently shortlisted for the Queensland Literary Awards.
Congratulations, Bianca.
So Bianca has asked about that idea of genre. So you're writing in one genre, and what if your next book is not in this kind of a genre that you're writing in? Do you think that that's going to be a problem to kind of shift? Because, obviously this is a very kind of Margaret Atwood kind of book, a very kind of future-based book. What if you are moving to a different book with your next?
What if I move into historical fiction? That's exactly what I'm doing. And you know what? Partly, Bianca, it's a great question, and thank you for asking it, but partly I am a little bit stubborn, and partly when I wrote Skylarking, I was like, hang on a second, just because my first book was historical fiction, is that it? Like, am I now a historical fiction writer forever? And so because I'm a bit of a pain in the bum, I was like, no, I'm not going to write that next. So I deliberately did try and write away from Skylarking because I wanted to show my chops. And I didn't know if I had them, but I wanted to show that I wanted to write in different ways. Like, I want to write lots of books and I want them all to be different. And I think that this one hasn't been as deliberate. This one is just the form that the story took. I know it's frustrating for publishers. And I get that, and probably for booksellers to a degree as well. But I also think, I just look at writers, Louise Erdrich is one that just springs immediately to mind, where I just think, you're just astonishing, and you've written this extraordinary range of books, and I just want to be like that when I grow up. I just want to be able to write, what I want to write. So
did that influence? This is a follow-up question, really, on the same one. Did that influence your? You changed publishers, and that kind of whole process of having to change, was that part of that change of genre? And also, did that involve a lot of industry connections and networking to be able to kind of move?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Let me tell you that in the kind of broken, lying on the floor, crying part, I felt like no industry connection was going to help me at all. But that's how we all feel, and I think that you're allowed to have your broken on the floor crying part, and then you do have to stand up and have a look at your connections. We are like any other industry, and no one would blink an eye in big business about calling up someone else, those kinds of things. So I think that that's something that I tell emerging writers all the time. Like, we are an industry, you use your networks, you've got to be smart about how you do this. And absolutely, I called upon people who I'd interviewed to say, can you hook me up with an agent? I didn't have an agent for Skylacking. And I knew that I wanted this one this time around, partly just because I wanted the separation between the creative work and the business part of it. And it has been such a gift to have Pippa Masson on board, because it is so freeing to not have to worry about both things at the same time. So yeah, but I do think that genre had to do with it. There was a lot of other things to do with it as well, but I did pay attention to the books that came out in the intervening years, which were incredible. The Glad Shout, Meg Mundell's The Trespassers. Like, suddenly this thing that the publishers were telling me was impossible became possible, and so that was exciting too, and that helped, I think.
Fantastic. So a question here about writing, without any spoilers, writing a slightly ambiguous kind of ending to a book. Does that take a lot of courage? And is there any pressure from, publishers, readers, whatever, to kind of come to like a definitive ending for a book?
Great question. And for people who listen to the podcast, you'll know that I wrote the ending of this book approximately 70 times. So this ending is the ending that I was like, oh God, yes. And when I say I wrote it 70 times, like the last kind of chapter, the moment that the book finishes on has really been in different forms, but basically the same since the start. And I think we do have that sense of a place that we're moving towards. But, a few times I remember saying to people, this book got way too smart for me. Like, I am not smart enough to write this book that I have created, or this plot that I've created. I do not know how to do this. So again, that's having a team behind you to say, yes, you can do this. Let's have a look at the different ways. And in the end, I threw, okay, what about this? What about this? That was my kind of internal process for the writing of it, which maybe is just sometimes how these things happen. In terms of ambiguity, a lot of people have asked in the past couple of weeks about sequels. Certainly for overseas publishers, particularly the US market, they like it a little more cut and dry. So I think that there is some want to have less ambiguity, but I also think what I know now about readers is that they are damn smart, and they also all want different things. And I've had that experience of throwing books across the room because maybe they finished too early, but also maybe they finished too late and they should have finished a chapter earlier, because I wanted to take that last step with the character, or I wanted to imagine what was next. So I do think, Mim needs to have the space at the end of the book that I give her, if that helps.
That's well said. I love that. Yeah.
And there's another question here about you've created a character in Mim who has a lot of self-doubt and struggles with moral issues. And, again, that's not a cut and dried, this is a heroine. This is someone who's heroic. And is there, a pressure to write that, or is it hard to write a character with balanced shades of grey?
Oh, well, yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's hard to write any character. I think all heroes are so deeply flawed, and I know that I anticipate that some readers will find that some of the moral dilemmas Mim's in are affronting, or ones that they wouldn't find themselves in, but I think that the journey that we go on as people is to embrace those failings, and to embrace the hero moments, and embrace the way that they smash up against each other, so that our very worst days can also be our very best days. And in fact, that when we pull ourselves from the shittiest bits, they are the bits that we are heroes and heroines as well. And so I think, without being all soppy about it like that, I wanted Mim to have moments of utter self-doubt. Don't we all? Like, I knew that for her to be the kind of character that I had people saying, not relating to, but people to say, oh my gosh, that's okay to feel like that. That's a legitimate way to feel. You got to write them all in.
Fantastic. And I have a personal question for both of you, actually, because we've got these two, the resource here with these two amazing fiction writers, with Trent and Kate. And I'm really very fascinated to know what fiction writers are doing with the pandemic in their contemporary novels. Are either of you, have you thought about writing contemporary fiction and what you're going to do? Are we going to be writing novels where the pandemic is actually a part of the background of what's happening, or are you going to avoid it completely and just pretend it never happened? What's going to happen for both of you?
Okay, it's a great question, Chrissy. I actually went to pretty far down the road of actually doing a kind of a novella about one of those classic Brisbane mums who are just all about their daughter getting married, right? And it's an entire novella set on one day of this girl's wedding day, or this woman's daughter's wedding day. And it's during, not only, it's basically, there was one Saturday morning when Black Lives Matter had just really hit its real fire point, and the pandemic was really just, quite terrifying. And I just thought, man, I'd like to write this quite kind of interesting novel about the way that we can get swept up in our own personal lives, and a whole novella about a mum who just, no matter what's happening, she will make this wedding happen for her daughter. And then on the way to just do an errand for her daughter, she hits someone, and she has to sort of put this body in the back of her car for the entire duration of the wedding. And it's like, so all of this crazy stuff is happening, but man, she will effing get that girl married, and it's just like, and it just sort of, has a little sort of take on this crazy world we're in and how we can get swept up in our own bloody stuff so often. Yeah, I'd love to do that at some stage, but yeah, I got preoccupied with something else. But yeah, Kate,
I love that. I see that on film right now.
I
think, Chrissy, I think it's a great question. And, maybe the gift that I've got is that I'd already decided to write historical fiction for my next one. But I do think that it will be somewhat like the climate crisis in that we can't avoid it. Like the world has changed. Even listening this morning, it's all so hard being in Melbourne right now. But all I needed this morning was a little bit of, ABC radio to put the world context, to give me the world context. And then I was like, yeah, okay. So we're doing fine. And I think that those things, like, it's such a total rupture on a global scale, but also in that personal way. And I think for the kids, Trent, I don't know if it's the same. Certainly, I imagine other parents who are in Melbourne, like, because the kids adapt to this new world and say things to me like, when I'm putting Etta to bed, she's like, I don't remember like where our school tables are, like all these things where you just think they've lost this in almost a whole year of their schooling. Especially for the little ones, it's such a huge part of their life. Like, it's strange now when I see people without a mask. It's strange when people are touching each other on screen, even though I want to touch people all the time. Like, and so I think that it will have to be, people are going to have to find a way. But I said this the other night too. I think the hardest thing for artists is that it is our role to reflect on these things and to present them back and to allow people to grapple with them through fiction or film or any other form of art. And so we kind of also bear the burden a little bit of doing the work on working out what's happened. And because we also bear the brunt of so much of the financial kind of fallout of it, I think that's a doubly hard thing for us to bear.
I got pretty interested into doing more of I'd love to do my sort of day job stuff, journalism, just really document it. We did this thing in our magazine where we got about 600 letters of people honestly just letting rip and letting their own inner writer come out and writing about their lives. And it's currently, all that whole collection is with the National Museum, and I'm just so excited. I would love to see someone cram all of these heartfelt thoughts people have had about this thing just into some amazing document. Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly hoping that at some point we can get the both of you and a few other writers together to talk about that very issue. I think it would be
for sure
important.
Can we do it in person?
Yeah.
Even if it's 2022, like just
That'd be good.
That's it. That ain't happening until it's
That's all right. Look, it's been absolutely enlightening, and you both have been so generous with your conversation tonight. It has been such a pleasure. So I'd like to thank you both for doing tonight. And to thank you, Kate, for this book, which is a gift to all of us readers. It's an amazing piece of work.
Oh, look, everyone's holding them up, Kate.
I'm going to gallery. I'm going to gallery. Oh, you're all amazing. Someone take a photo for me.
Oh, yeah, let's take hang on.
You're all so amazing. Can I use this moment too, Chrissy, to say to you and to Avid and to your Brisbane community of writers, and like, honestly, you blow our minds. You do such an extraordinary job, and just the reason that we're all here because booksellers like you are so passionate about what you do, and Trent as well. I know, like, it's such a crazy time leading up to publication, and I'm thrilled that we could have this conversation. Total joy.
Man, I've learned a lot, and it's such a pleasure. Kate. Thank you so much. Thanks for all you do. And man, if we were at Avid, it would be a packed house. Let me tell you, the numbers that are here, and it would be the best evening. Like September in our neck of the woods is like the best place to be on earth, and there'd be maybe even like a laser show, and
mate, it is a date next year, 2021, Brisbane. It's on.
Yeah,
we'll see
now,
you then.
I've opened the room up, so if people want to unmute themselves for a final clap, we can actually do that. So
I can see all your faces. Oh, you're all beautiful. Oh, you're so lovely.
Congratulations.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Well done, Kate.
Oh, you're so gorgeous. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thank you.
Okay, well done. Love it.